we do like to talk about staff training because I think one of the most common things that we hear from daycare and boarding facility owners is this: the staff sucks the life out of you. So we've heard that phrase a lot of times, I would say.
And I think we've been talking about this for a long time. And I think it's like the whole chicken and the egg. People are hesitant to invest a lot in training staff because there's so much turnover. I would say the opposite is true. There's a lot of turnover because we're not investing in training our staff and preparing them for the role that we really want them to do. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And that goes to one of my, I guess, soapbox issues about the whole staff training process is that the people who will exist and will stay with you in that chaotic, I don't have any kind of training protocol, just we throw you to the wolves and hope you come out the other end. Those are the employees that you generally don't want. Those are the employees that are like, whatever, this is like a total chaotic environment, but whatever, this is just a job, so I'll just put up with it. Those are not the employees you want. The employees that you want, those A-team players that we always, hear from pet care facility owners, that's what they want. They want that team environment. They want that person that's going to go above and beyond. They want that person that's really responsible. Those type of people, they don't like to live in that chaotic world of throw me to the wolves and I'll figure it out. So when you have a lot of high turnover, a lot of times it does go back to the fact that you don't have any kind of training process in place. And so people get in there and then they're like, I don't know what I'm doing, and it's confusing and it's hard and this is not where I excel. So they leave and then you get frustrated. So I do think it's that chicken and the egg. I think it's exactly that. I think there's high turnover because you don't have a good process in place, as opposed to there's high turnover just because there's high turnover. Now, I do think as an industry, and Susan and I obviously deal with hundreds and hundreds of pet care facilities annually, I will say as an industry, this is one of the things that we don't do very well as an industry. We don't train staff very well as an industry. So it's the great thing is there's lots of room for you to improve. And that's what we're going to talk about today is I will say simple. They're simple, but they do take time. So simple processes that you can use that do take time. And I think when you really create your training process, once you have that together, it ends up being a way to recruit people. It ends up being a way to hire people. It ends up being a way to really rule out the wrong people before you ever hire them and find the right people right from the start. It also allows you to identify really early in the process what employees aren't going to work out. So all of that is really the reason we would say put some time and effort into this. But it's not the fun stuff that everybody likes. So,
well, I know it is frustrating when you feel like you've invested in someone and they don't stay. But I do think if we change our mindset and open up our mindset to maybe taking a different approach, if the egg approach hasn't worked, then let's try the chicken approach and see if we get better results.
So let's start out with and I'm going to throw this to you, Susan, because you're always really good at explaining sort of the skills versus the knowledge. Like starting out to begin with, let's just say as a starting point, very simply, you have to identify the roles you need in your pet care facility.
Right.
So I know that there's a bunch of people that are going to go, well, everybody's cross-trained. They all do everything. And that is reality. I understand that. That's how my business was as well. My trainers were separate, but my daycare staff did customer service and they did client care and they did daycare reservations and they did pretty much everything. And a lot of people will have a separate kennel staff, but some of those kennel team will also do daycare. So I get that, but you still have to identify for your facility the roles you need. And whether that's somebody that's working in the kennel, somebody that might be a trainer, somebody that might be doing daycare, somebody that might be a groomer, like every single role that you need to train, that's number one. So we're just going to give you a step-by-step outline for how to do this. So number one is identify all the roles you need. Do you want to add to that, Susan, or actually expand on that with the skills and knowledge stuff?
So once you have your roles, there should be a job description that says what are their responsibilities. And from those responsibilities, you've got to look at what does the person need to be able to fulfill and do those responsibilities at the level of an independent worker. That once they're trained, and our goal in training should be that they have had instruction on the knowledge and the skills so that when you're done training them, they can go work independently with ongoing coaching and oversight. But it shouldn't be where you have to spoon feed, which is what we hear a lot, spoon feeding people what to do. And I think it's great to cross train people, but that's very unfair at the beginning when you're new people. And I think one of the things we forget is how much knowledge we've obtained once we've been in this industry for a while. And so you start with your role and look at what knowledge do they need to fulfill that role at my level of expectation to be a worker. So if it's a lodging tech, they need to know what does a healthy, every species of animal that you lodge, so dog, cat, rabbit, hamster, bird, what would be signs of illness? We need to know about how to do activities, how to clean, how to walk dogs. And so there's a difference between knowledge, talking about what's a healthy animal is a knowledge, whereas walking a dog on a loose leash to me is a skill. So we need to make list of the knowledge and the skills. We probably want them to know about breeds of dogs, stress signals, aggressive displays, all those knowledge things. And then skills are like the loose leash walking, body blocking, things that they can demonstrate and you can observe them doing.
Some of those, for some of those roles, some of those are going to overlap. For instance, if you have a groomer versus a lodging tech, somebody that's working in your lodging area, both of those should understand stress signals. But maybe your groomer doesn't have to know everything the person that's working in the kennel does, but there is going to be a lot of overlap. Just like your kennel person is not going to necessarily going to learn how to groom a dog, obviously. The good thing is once you start listing out those roles and those skills and the responsibilities for that particular role in terms of the knowledge and the skills, there are going to be some duplicates. So you just can make a massive list and then start matching them up to what role needs to know those things.
Yeah.
So that, and I put this step 1 in there, identify the roles you need to train, like lodging, daycare, enrichment, etc. And then step 2, identify the skills and knowledge that person needs to have in that role. And that would be, like Susan said, the goal would be that eventually that person can do that job without being micromanaged or having someone supervise them. So what are the final skills they need?
Yeah, I think the question we need to ask and answer on every role is what does success in this job look like?
Yeah, that's really good. So
and you make sure your training program sets them up to get to the success that you want. And I think a lot of times we don't focus on the end result and we get frustrated.
And then those, hopefully, if you're thinking about the big picture here with staff training, which is what we want you to do, those ultimately those roles and those responsibilities and those skills are going to turn into, or you might have the job description and vice versa, but they should match. So that's the other thing. I'm just going to mention that as you build these, you want to have that tied to the job description, because ultimately you're going to use that job description to hire. And so you want to have make sure those match. And a lot of times we do see they don't always match. And so sometimes that is what causes frustration, is someone applies for a job based on a job description. They then get into the job and they end up doing something that's not at all on their job description. And that can cause confusion. So again, it goes to setting those expectations right from the beginning, where you're hiring the right person and then you're training them based off of what you told them you are hiring them for. And I can't tell you how many times we see there's a disconnect there, which can cause frustration and cause people to leave. So you want to make sure that looking at the bigger picture, that's part of the process as well.
So once the knowledge and skills that they need, then what's the best way to train, and when, it's the sequential order? Because again, we need to go back to a new person in the role doesn't know anything about the job. How do you get them started? What is the best thing? And you want them productive for you. So one of the first things you may teach them about is cleaning, because there's a lot to clean in our businesses, and teaching about cleaning. But then there's also knowledge. What's the difference between cleaning, disinfecting, and sanitizing? How do you do that safely for them and the pets in the care? Do we have to vacuum and sweep hair up before we put any moisture on it? We think cleaning sounds simple, but there is a step-by-step process to it. And so if this sounds like, oh my God, this is overwhelming, how can I do this? You just take it a little bit at a time and you'll figure this out. But there needs to be a plan around it.
Yeah, and I always tell the story about when I first volunteered at a local shelter. It was the rescue operation in my area. And I volunteered there as a trainer, but they wanted me to start with just cleaning the kennels. Of course, I said I would. And for those of you that heard me tell this story, there was one guy there who was training me how to do the cleaning. And I thought he was obsessive about what I had to do. Like, it was very formal. And I specifically remember how he told me to roll the hose. And every time I would roll the hose, he was like, "You're not doing it right. You have to go back and start over." And I, like, literally, I was like, this man is like a lunatic. But once I learned how to do it, and then I realized what happens when you don't roll the hose the right way and it gets a kink in it. And then it's 30 minutes of trying to fix the kink, and you turn the water on and there's no water coming out, and you have to go turn the water off so you can fix the kink. It made so much sense to me. But I remember when he was training me, I was like, he's a little anal retentive about this.
Because he didn't tell you.
That is the part he left out, is the why
Yes.
of it. He was fixated on how to do it right, but not so much on the why. So when you're creating all of this, you do want to make sure your staff understand the why of all of this. So I put step 3 there in the comments about determine the sequential order that you want to teach the skills and knowledge that you identified. This is all the stuff they need to know. So I do think that most people think about that and they go, oh my gosh, that's really is overwhelming. Like you just said, Susan, this is how I train my staff. I'm just going to say, this is how we see a lot of staff getting trained. Is day 1, you're so excited, a new staff member comes to work and you're like, whoa, yay, we got a new employee. And you usually will take the time to introduce them to everybody else. And then usually you'll get a little busy. So you'll say, hey, can you go show him the ropes, teach him what to do? And some staff member takes him and goes and does whatever that person happens to be doing that day. So they shadow that person. Day 2, the person comes in, you're like, hey, new employee, I'm busy today. I don't really have time for you, but you do need to get trained. So you just tell them to go shadow somebody else. Might be the same person, it might not be. And again, if you don't have a formal thing written down as to what that person needs to be trained, they end up just doing whatever that employee's doing again. You don't actually know if they're learning anything new or if they're just repeating everything they learned yesterday. Just really depends. By day 3, a lot of times you're just like, I am like way overwhelmed with all the stuff I have to do to run this business. So just find somebody and learn from them. That is how a lot of us train. That's how I trained before I ended up getting a training process together. And then if you look at it from the employee standpoint, especially again, those 18 players, that's chaotic for them and it's not fun for them. And they're usually getting overwhelmed with all the information that they're being fed all at once, especially considering if you don't have any kind of training protocol, they're probably learning way too much to even comprehend it all. So you do have to go back and break it down. One of the best people that can help you to create this training schedule is your newest employee, because they will usually have really good input on where they felt overwhelmed, where they felt like they weren't able to learn, where they felt like things weren't explained to them properly. And then again, going back and making sure they understand why you're doing everything the way you're doing it. So it can be overwhelming and it does take time, but just think through, like Susan said, what's the stuff I need them to learn the quickest and get them productive, which generally is going to be cleaning. And then what do we need to start teaching them so that long term they can do this job by themselves? And then how do you know? So how do you know that they're learning stuff? So do you want to talk about kind of reviewing their knowledge as well, Susan?
I think we need to do more check-ins with staff as they're going through training process to have kind of a two-way communication. Week 1, what do you want them to learn? How do you know if they've learned it before they go on to the stuff that you want to teach them next week? And so there's a couple of ways you can do that. With skills, it's great to have them demonstrate it. Demonstrate walking, greeting a dog, demonstrate loose leash walking, demonstrate body blocking. And then if you see things are not doing exactly right, you do coaching so that they get better at it and they practice that and tell them what they need to practice the next week. As far as knowledge, you can just have a conversation and talk about either names of dogs, breeds of dogs, whatever was important that week. Talk about and ask them some questions and see how they respond. Not a grilling, or you can even do quizzes, whatever you want to do, but it's that check in. And I tried to get my supervisors sit down every week and just have 20 to 30 minutes and go over the training from the week and how are they feeling about it? Where do they want more help? And do this check in so that if someone isn't getting names of dogs and breeds, we aren't putting more stuff on them next week when they haven't absorbed what we wanted them to do week one. Because what's going to happen is when you overwhelm people, they're going to get frustrated and they're going to quit. And then the turnover happens.
So I'm going to run to questions real quick. So Aaron said, I'll pop in a question here. I have a really difficult time figuring out what tool to use that gets all the employees on the same page without it overwhelming them. So that is a great question. I think it's a combination of, first of all, I just put step 4 in the comments here about writing down how and when each skill or knowledge is going to be taught to your staff by role and day by day, week by week. So this is where, and it doesn't have to be extensive. Initially, you're just going to be doing this as a bullet form. So day 1, what do I want that employee to do and learn and understand? Day 2, what do I want him to do and learn and understand? Day 3, that's all for week 1. And then going back to what Susan just said, adding in that weekly check-in process to just confirm, did they learn it? Are they able to do it? Have they done it? And I've seen them do it successfully, or do I need to continue to coach them? So I think having that written down does give you that tool that you can use as a checklist to understand where your employee is in the training process. And then I would also be looking at whether or not they are accomplishing things. So if you're in, week 4 and they still are having problems with something from week 1, then that shows you that either the training isn't clear or you're not going with the check-ins to do the coaching. And I think a lot of us tell somebody to do something once and then they expect them to just remember that for the rest of their lives. It just doesn't work that way. And especially again, when you don't explain the why to them. So I think the why is really important, but I think you have to go back to that. Where's the missing link? Did I not teach it? Did I not watch them do it? Did I not coach them? But then I think the other thing that comes into play for that particular question is your SOPs. So along with how to do everything, especially those processes for each facility, which are going to be like, we all do cleaning, we all do disinfecting, we all, walk dogs from one place to the other. But what does that look like for your facility? What leashes and collars and harnesses do you use? What cleaning agents do you use? What disinfecting agents do you use? All of that should be documented in your SOPs. So when it comes down to, are the employees on the same page? It's very simple. Are they following the SOPs or not? So this is where it really helps you identify whether or not you should retrain somebody or let them go. Because if they have been trained on those SOPs and they're still not doing it, they're probably not a good fit for your facility. If they have not ever seen the SOPs and maybe employee A taught employee B and maybe employee A taught them some other way to do it, then that's a matter of retraining them so that everybody's doing things the same way because you have an SOP. That's one of the beauties of an SOP. And I know people don't like to do their SOPs because it is a time consuming process, but have your employees help you. Like tell every employee, write down the process you guys use for mopping the floor or for creating the mop bucket or walking a dog through the hallway. Have them each write it down. If you haven't ever done formal training, you'll probably end up with 3 different ways that they clean the floor. And so it's a great way to, number one, help them write your SOPs for you, but then also standardize the process and then retrain everybody to say, this is how we do it. So hopefully that makes sense. I don't know if Susan, if you had anything, I went on a soapbox there for a
I
second.
know. I'm glad I'm not the only one that goes off on a soapbox on this topic. No, I think that's great. And we'll talk about at the end some of the specific tools that are out there and available through us, and there's others that having some of your formal training consistent is really important, and there's some good tools available now. There weren't so many good tools available when Robin and I started, so that's the good news of how this industry has evolved, but that does help.
And also, if you delegate your training, which ultimately I do think is a good idea, if you have somebody that is your kind of go-to person and you're like, we do a really good job because every new employee we give to Mark or Mary and then they do all the training, that's awesome until Mark and Mary leave. So have Mark and Mary start documenting what they do to make sure that if they leave, you have that training process in place. So there's a lot of places that do a really good job of training, but it's not documented. So it's only as good as that employee who's there as the trainer. And make sure that they are starting to document, okay, day one, we have the employee fill out some employment forms, and then we teach them how to do cleaning and disinfecting, and we show them the process for whatever. Like day by day, what does your trainer do with that person every single day? And then you have a formal training program that you can start tweaking. And it is going to take a little bit of time for you to work through that process, but it's a lot better to do that now than to figure out that those people end up leaving and you don't have that formal process written down.
Yeah, onboarding is so important to especially these 18 players, and there's some good 18 players out there looking for jobs. And so this is an opportunity to hire some of them, but they're going to want you to make them feel very important and that you're going to train them at the pace that is comfortable for them and they know what that process is. And so once you get this documented, you can say we have a 6-week training program, an 8-week, 10-week. I think right now we talk about a lot of times because we're desperate for people and getting them into roles, we do what we talk about is we just like vomit everything we know at them. And as Robin said, we think we told them once and they're going to remember it. They're not, they're overwhelmed. Think about when you went into a new field, something you had never done before, or even if people have been at other centers, they haven't been at your center. So they may know some of the knowledge stuff, but they aren't going to know your SOPs. They aren't going to know everything that you expect. And so we've got to do this at a slower pace and present bite-sized information. I know Robin, as a dog trainer, what can people comprehend?
It's tiny amounts, and that's where I think we just do overwhelm people and we expect them to learn more than what is even possible. So even for Knowing Dogs, which is our staff training program, and it's Knowing Dogs 101, 8 weeks, 8 modules. And I often will get people that'll go, can I just have someone sit down and watch that all at one day? And I say, yes, you can, but they're not going to learn anything. It's not designed that way. So that you can sit someone down and have them watch 8 hours of anything or 4 hours of anything. But if they're not able to apply it, and especially when everything builds on everything, which is what your training does, ideally you want day 1, day 2 to build on day 1 and week 2 to build on week 1. But you have to give them time to practice and then help to coach them as the first couple times, because they're probably not going to get it 100%. But if you do it, I can tell you the employee is going to be less frustrated. They're going to get better trained and they're probably going to stay with you longer because it's been a good experience for them. But it may take, most places there's an introductory or probationary period is what it's called in some states, of 90 days. But yet most of us expect our employees to be trained in 3 weeks. Yeah. There's a reason that there's a 90-day period usually. And the good thing is if you have a formal training process where you can say, this is what you should accomplish month 1, this is what you should accomplish month 2, you'll start to see early on, are they keeping up with that training? And if they're not, then that's a good red flag for you before you invest 6 months of training and then you decide they're not a good fit. You can start to see that a lot earlier. So that helps you to not keep people on too long. The other thing it allows you to do is build in potential pay increases or celebrations So not everybody does this via pay, but you can hit those milestones to say month one, we are going to celebrate and put on Facebook that you've accomplished month one of all of your training. Maybe by the end of 10 weeks or 12 weeks or whatever, when they've finished all of the onboarding training, you can give them a pay raise, or you can give them a bonus, or you can give them, we have some facilities that give a special shirt at that time or a special leash and post that on Facebook. But you have milestones you can now celebrate that help to also motivate that staff member, which is really important to all of us as humans. Positive reinforcement, very important. All right,
Yeah,
I'm
and
going to ask a question real quick, Susan,
okay.
and then I'll go back to that. Amanda said, we invest in them in training, but they still seem like they do what they want, regardless of protocol, show up, get a paycheck, and go home.
I would say yes, I've heard that before, and I think there are some people, but I argue that most of employees don't come in every day wanting to just screw up and not have a good experience. So I think as leaders, we've got to set the culture and the tone of what we expect. And are we holding people accountable during the training period when we're trying to get them into good habits to doing protocols according to our SOPs? And if we're not, then whose fault is that? And I think that's our own. I think some of this does come back to looking yourself in the mirror, because it can be frustrating and hard and challenging. But we've got to make sure our SOPs are up to date. They're in a format that everybody can understand and reach, and that you have agreement from your leaders that this is the way we're going to do it. And we're going to hold the leaders and the staff accountable to doing that. And that's why you want that consistency in training and doing that from the beginning. Because once you let the horse out of the stable and they're running every which direction, then it's too late. So you've got to, and there were times where I had to go back. We would agree as a team, this is a new SOP, and then we would retrain as a group on this new SOP, and this is the way it has to be done. And you've got to be consistent in holding everybody accountable to doing it this way. So there's also the accountability from the leadership side that I see doesn't happen. And then people are like, well, they don't care, then I can just do it any old way because it doesn't matter if I do it right or wrong.
Yeah, I do think accountability is a huge issue. And I think it does go back to having that written SOP to say, I mean, the beauty about the SOP is they're either doing it or they're not. But there's not this, he showed me how to do it, and John does it totally different, and Rick, he does it his own way, and so I just made up my own way too. That, when you start to have that problem, it does become really hard to hold anybody accountable, because you do have everybody doing it a different way. But if you have a SOP and you get your team together and you say, this is the way we're doing it, and explain why, I would be open to changing the SOP if they have better ideas, but they have to understand this. They have to get to the same why, and they have to understand maybe you won't agree with them because their way costs more or their way takes more time or whatever. But I find it very rare that employee wants to create a better system that's going to screw you over. Honestly, most of the time, my employees had the best way of doing things. And so if you listen to them, they might come up with a better process, and you can change your SOPs and then retrain based on that new process. The important thing is to have that process written down so that everyone's held to the same standard. I think that's where it becomes hard to hold people accountable, is if you don't have a standard to point to. And then we had several people that say they all have to cross train, and we would not disagree with cross training. What I was saying in the beginning was there are multiple roles. The fact that you're saying you cross train means there's multiple roles you're training to, because you're cross training. So it's not that you shouldn't cross train. I actually think cross training is a really good idea. But what I am saying is that there's skills and knowledge based on what that person's doing, and you have to write all those down and then decide. There's things to do with the dog if they're lodging. There's things to do with the dog in their daycare. Some of them are the same. Some of them are different. There's things to do with the dog when they're grooming. There's things to do with the dog when you check a dog in. So it's just having all of those roles identified, and then cross training, I think, is perfect.
Right. What you need to do is allow them time to master some of the first things you train on before you throw more roles and responsibilities on top. And I think too often we're introducing concept knowledge and skills, but we don't give them the time to master it, which requires soaking it in, being able to apply it, and practice, like Robin said. Walking a dog on a loose leash, body blocking is intuitive to some people and they get it really quickly. For other people, they've got to work at it. So if they haven't figured out how to body block yet, and now we're saying, okay, we want you to manage dogs and do gate boundary work, they're going to fail. And no one is going to stay at a job where they feel like a failure.
Yeah. And I think that's a critical piece to understand. This goes into, Bart just posted this. I love this comment. One thing he forgot to do, which I heard years ago, is to make their first day an event, a real welcome to the team, to let them know they're on the great team with a great culture. So I love that. And I do think that is, again, you only have one chance to make a good first impression, is what I was going to say. They're looking at you just as much as you're so thrilled to have this new employee, but they want to know they are valued and appreciated. So having that, going to the effort of making sure their first day is a celebration, I think is really important. This is the same thing that we did with dogs. Like the first day of a dog coming to daycare or lodging, when in my facility we had little bins with the dog's name, you better be sure that new dog had a name on one of the bins. Same thing if you have employee lockers or employee mailboxes or whatever, making sure that person has a name there already. So it's not like an afterthought. Oh yeah, we'll get your name later. Didn't you know it's coming today? Like you want to make sure that they do feel valued from day one. That's definitely important. Okay, I'm going off on a soapbox. Apparently I have a lot of soapbox issues with this topic. So Kelly had mentioned, I can't say how many staff members out of fear stop good play. That is a good point. We see that a lot as well. I definitely would say that watching the way Susan and I typically teach canine body language specifically is we start with photos and then we go to slow motion video and then we go to regular fast motion video with real dogs in that order. And the reason is because for those of you that have been doing daycare for a while, things that other people don't even notice. Like you'll see things and basically go, oh, that's going to happen. And then you stop the play and the new person don't even know what the heck you just saw. And it's really hard to train your brain to see all that. So we generally will start with, and if you've ever done knowing dogs, you'll see this is the progression in knowing dogs, is we start with pictures, freeze frame the thing you want the employee to learn, freeze frame it so they can see it in a still photo. You could take a video off of YouTube and do this. Just freeze frame it where you want them to see the whale eye or the licking the lips or whatever it is, and then play it in slow motion, let them see it there, and then play it in fast motion so that their brain actually learns how to process that information. So that's a long answer to say yes to your question.
Well, yeah, it is. And you hit the nail on the head. They're stopping it out of fear because they don't have the confidence to know what they're seeing and to manage it. So they haven't comprehended the knowledge and skills yet. And so they're doing the right thing, really, because you would rather err on the side of safety and stopping play until they've got knowledge and skills, and mastering that breeds confidence in your team members. And so the fear will go away once they do know that. But it is a process. And again, because we've done this so long, we forget what it was like to be new before we could read body language. Robin and I have taught canine body language a lot, and it's interesting. You can put up a still photo and get different. We'd ask people, is this a green, yellow, or red? And you get different views, and that's just from a photo, let alone dogs running around and there's multiple of them you're trying to watch at the same time. It takes your brain a while to comprehend that and be able to do that.
Yeah, and the other thing I think that's important in teaching people, especially in your play groups, is if the only place they see, or if the only place you're teaching them is in your play group and you run a good play group, which is ideally how everybody runs their play group, they're not seeing any of the bad stuff. So the other thing you have to remember is if the only way they're learning is by what they're seeing in a well-run play group, they're missing a whole bunch of stuff that they need to learn, which is the other reason I would get photos off of YouTube or go to a dog park with them or whatever. There's tons of videos out there. I'm telling you, just Google dogs playing and you'll get all kinds of fight videos. that people think are good videos, and you can use those to train your staff. You want to make sure they understand the things that you don't want to see, but they're not going to see them if you have a really well run daycare and the only place you train them is in your daycare. And obviously, we don't want them to see the bad things, but they do need to see them on some video or in some pictures, or however you need to create that in a safe way, not necessarily with your own dogs, but with dogs on other videos, so that they understand what are the things, what are the warning signals that we want them to look for. So I think that's the other reason that we would definitely include some other video training for those employees, so that they know what they're looking for, that hopefully they don't see that often, but they need to identify it if it does happen. All right. So Ben had said, what happens to the staff at this point? Do they accept the change if they were hired 2 years ago? I think you're going back to referring to creating your SOPs. Do you want to talk about that, Susan?
Yeah, I would say that for the most part, when you explain why that this is going to promote teamwork, put everybody on the same page, you're going to learn a lot about your team, and the people that you probably want on your team will accept it and take the new way, especially if you do like Robin suggested and have everybody give input on how they do it, and then you select the one that you think is best.
We like to teach things and tell people our mistakes. So I operated for 2 years without a SOP. And when I finally realized I really need to put this SOP in place, I did have one of my employees like quit the next day. We had a team meeting. I went into that meeting thinking, this is an easy meeting. All I did was formalize everything we're already doing. I didn't think my employees would have a problem with it, but I had one employee that was just furious because I documented everything and I said, this is what we're going to operate on. And I didn't change any I didn't change any processes. I just documented them all and then gave out this SOP, had a team meeting and said, okay, this is going to be our SOP. And I need everyone to read this and sign it, whatever. And everybody was like, that's great, except for one person who quit the next day. And in hindsight, he was the person that shouldn't have been on my team to begin with. So it worked out. But it is interesting how putting something in process does cause people to react differently. So I would be prepared for some of that. And that's one of the reasons that if I had to do it again, I would not have written the SOP. I would have done what I recommend now, which is have your team create the processes. I mean, you can tweak them once they provide them to you, but they would have had a lot more buy-in right from the beginning, because it would have been a group document that we created together. The way I did it, I just wrote it all down myself. I would not recommend that, partly because it's a lot more time consuming, but partly because my staff had no buy-in when I did it that way too.
Yeah, and I think part of this, if you have someone that doesn't buy in, then you can have an individual conversation with them to find out what their concern is about the process or the procedure. I wouldn't do that in a group meeting. But in the end, do you want someone on your team who isn't willing to follow the SOP that is your expectation of success in the job? And sometimes we've got to be willing to let people go and rebuild. And if you have a good training process, it's not so painful to lose somebody. It's actually, you have then formal process to bring somebody else in.
So I'm putting the last step here so I have throughout the comments the step-by-step process to creating this training program that you're going to use for your facility. So I just put step 5 in, which is basically start using you up in step 4. You documented when you wanted all the items to be taught, day by day, week by week. And remember, that could take 3 months or 4 months, depending on the role. And then you're going to start using that next time you bring in a person to train. You're going to start using your training program and then tweak it as you see it needs to be tweaked. Maybe you forgot something, which is very common. You're going to forget, oh, I never taught them how to actually dilute the cleaning solution or whatever. You're going to find ways to tweak it. You might find you want to change the order because maybe you really do want them to do something ahead of something else. You might also find that you skip something because, again, it's hard when you start thinking about how much you might, like Susan said, you might start teaching somebody how to do the gate boundary and you never taught them how to body block. So you might have to add that in. So you just want to start using it and improving it. I will tell you again, the best people to help you with this is your newest employee, because they're going to be able to tell you where you could make improvements right from even if you already have a program going, they're going to be the best people to help you out to tweak it. So You definitely need to look at that.
People want the magic wand on getting good staff and keeping good staff. And there's so many steps to the process of building a great team. But having a formal staff training program, good onboarding so that they do see they're important is key to getting there. And consistency is just really important, that you are providing the knowledge and skills they need to be successful in that job, and that you can tell everybody in their role what success in the job looks like to you.
Yeah, and I think that's critical because if you don't know, they don't know either. And nobody
There's no way they can get to that destination because you haven't told them, are you going to Austin or San Antonio or Dallas? I don't know. We'll see where we end up.
yeah.
How fun is that?
So to go, I'll just read through the steps again. Step one would be identify the roles you need to train, lodging, daycare, enrichment. Those are all going to depend on what services you offer. And I would remember to add that lobby person, whoever answers the phone, that's also a role. Step two is identify the skills and knowledge that person needs to have for each role. Step three is determine the order that you need to teach that person the skills and the knowledge in every role as well. Step four is write down how and when each of those things will be taught day by day, week by week, and remember to include check-ins to make sure the person's learning. And then step five is start using that training program. So again, sounds simple. 5 steps. How hard can that be?
But
But
how many roles do I know in my business? There were
yeah,
a lot of roles. I had probably 8 different job descriptions, which meant I needed to have a training plan for every role. And that didn't
right.
account for cross training.
And that's what I said at the very beginning when I said it's easy, but that doesn't always equate to simple to do. But it's also not rocket science. It just takes a commitment to say, I'm going to spend X amount of time every week whittling away at this and just start doing it. And if you just whittle away at it a little bit at a time, you'll eventually get there. But if you never do anything, you're never going to have it done. So it isn't something you're necessarily going to just get done in a week or 2 days. It's going to take some time. Susan, I'm going to show this real quick as an example. So this is just an example of one of the roles that we have in Pet Guru College. When we say break this out week by week, is we took lodging counselor as one of the roles that most pet care facilities are going to have if they have lodging. And so at the top, we listed what the accomplishments would be for that week. And you can see those listed. And then we broke down day 1, day 2, day 3. If you want to scroll up to the day 4 and day 5. So that's obviously 5 days of training, generally speaking, for a full-time employee, but that might be split up if you're doing part-time training into more than those 5 days might be over a 2-week period. But you'll see for each day, we listed the things that we want that individual to learn. Day 5, we always would do a Q&A or a review. And that's that check-in that Susan talked about. So just making sure everything that person learned, can they demonstrate it? Can they repeat it back to us? Can we watch them do it and then help them to coach them, make sure they understand it? And really just as a reminder to make sure that they haven't forgot something, because you might have taught them something on day 1 and then 4 days later, they've learned a whole bunch of other stuff. So you just want to make sure that they've retaining the information that you're teaching them. So that's that check-in, not to be done as like pass fail or to beat them over the head. We want that to be a helpful thing so that you're actually using that as an opportunity to coach that employee.
This is just one way you can lay it out. But again, it's initialing like the date you introduce something. And I wouldn't, at some points, the day you introduce it may not be the date that I think they've truly mastered it and can be expected to go and do it on their own. That may come later. So you may have some things that come back that you want to give them time to practice, use it on the job so that they've mastered it. When Robin and I first wrote Off Leash Dog Play, I was so excited because I finally had something to train my staff on body language and how to manage the dogs. And it was great. They read it. And then I would walk by the play groups and go, they're not doing it. And I know they know how to do it because it was in the book. And there is a difference between reading and getting your knowledge and then applying it on the job. And applying it on the job goes back to a lot of those check-in things and telling them what you expect, how they're going to use it and apply it to do their job. You got to connect the dots and laying out your expectation before they get the information, and then after they get it, what you expect them to do with it. And so using a checklist like this is also helpful. You can at least make sure everybody's been introduced to it, but you need to circle back on those critical skills and knowledge to make sure that it's mastered and being applied to the job the way you want it to get that in success in the role.
I just showed you week 1 of that lodging counselor, but how many weeks is that one, Susan? So that document goes for 10 weeks. So every week is that way: day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5. And day 5 is always that check-in. But then you'll also see later on, we do circle back to some of the initial, we do another check-in later on to say, remember those things you did in week 1? Do you still remember how to do them? Do you still understand them? Do you have you moved on with your level of skill with those? So really, it's just taking the time to document all of that so that you have a process for training your staff. So this document that we just showed you a sample of is obviously from Pet Guru College, which is obviously done for you, but we would love for you to sign up for Pet Guru College, but you don't have to. You can create your own. And what we want is, again, it goes back to what Susan and I said early on. Our industry, the pet industry, is not well known for its training process. So what we want to do is just help the industry as a whole to say retaining staff, hiring staff, onboarding staff, like the whole staff training component affects your whole business and could be done as an industry. We can do better at this. So just getting everybody to understand that this is something that every business should have, whether you use Pet Guru College or you use whatever you create. We just think it's important, and it's going to help you long term because you won't have that revolving door of employees, which is what none of us want.
The other thing is you don't have the frustration from the other team members either, because they know there's a progression plan and they can't expect that Joe, who started last week, can run play groups and keep them safe as well as someone who's been there 6 months to a year or 2 years. We've got to set our expectation on skill level to give people time to experience more situations.
So Ben asked, do you ever make it a requirement to learn or study before the job start date?
I think you have to be really careful about the laws in your state or province about that. A lot of times, if you're requiring education, it has to be paid. So I would make sure I understood that. I do know some people, we've been told, will give a new hire off-leash dog play and have them read it before they start, but I don't know what they've done as far as compensating them for that.
We have a lot of people who will actually have their staff, allow their staff to do some of their training, if it's reading a book or doing Pet Guru College online or whatever. Some of the folks that are doing that training do it on their off hours at home. And again, you have to make sure that you're following the labor laws, because most places that still has to be a paid, that you have to pay them for that. So if they're working 8 hours and then they're going home and doing 2 hours, now you're paying overtime possibly. So you just want to make sure that you factor all that in. If you're going to have them do some of that at home, they may not be doing as much work in the actual facility, which is fine. That's an option. It's just making sure that you're compensating them properly according to the laws.
And I think you can learn something about prospective employees. If you do say, I want you to go through this, read this book, or do some of this work ahead of time, if they haven't done it, what are you going to do? And have that planned out so you're also consistent. And they also know if they haven't done it, do they then not come to work and they don't have a job? So just playing through all those scenarios so you have it figured out in advance.
For those that don't know, Pet Guru College is our newest training program. It includes knowing dogs, so we still have knowing dogs, but Pet Guru College is designed by roles. So we have the lodging counselor role, which we just were showing you the template for that outline. It has a daycare counselor role, an enrichment counselor role, which is basically a career path for someone that's in daycare. So it's an additional role once somebody's learned the daycare counselor role. And then there's also client care counselor role. So that information is all in there. All of those roles do include the applicable parts of knowing dogs as well. So we still have knowing dogs 101 and 201, which some people purchase just for canine body language. If you want a more extensive training program, then Pet Guru College is out there now as well. Or like I said, you can figure out how to do this for your own facility. Our Pet Guru College program does take into consideration that you still need an SOP. So you're still going to need that SOP that will basically sit alongside the Pet Guru College. We've just taken the bulk of the training out of what you need to do because it's already in Pet Guru College, and then you do the training parts of your SOP. All right. So Holly said, I was told that 8 to 12 weeks for training was too long to teach new employees all of the job duties required for our employees, i.e. pet resort attendant, grooming, enrichment, client. How do I convince the owner of the facility it's worth the time to invest in new employees?
I would make the list. I would make the list of all the knowledge and skills and say, okay, here's my dilemma. This is everything they need to learn to do this job at the level you want them to do it. I have it mapped out 8 to 12 weeks. How would you shorten it?
Yeah, I would ask them to tell you what they would like to cut. The other thing is we always go back to examples. If you have kids and you're going to teach them how to drive. So I think in Virginia, it was 40 hours of behind the wheel training that my daughter had to have before she could get her driver's license after she passed the test. That was just for the 40 hours. And 40 of those 40 hours, 10 of them had to be at night. So she had 40 hours of training, 10 at night, she could get her driver's license. That driver's license didn't let her drive any children. It didn't let her drive any of her friends. She could basically get in the car by herself and drive certain places. And I think and it was another year. She had to have her permit for another year before she could drive with any of her friends or any children in the car. And that's where I think, what is the expectation? Because 8 to 12 weeks of training, and then that person can now work with someone else watching them. Yeah, that's probably perfectly fine. But 8 to 12 weeks for that person to totally master it and be able to do it by themselves, probably not. So that's where you have to determine what is the goal at the end of 8 to 12 weeks. And then I would also look at, are you having issues? Are you having, one of the biggest things that Susan and I get are staff turnover, like we mentioned, and then fights or bites, whether it's to a staff member or to a dog. And one of the biggest clues that people are not well trained is that you're having injuries, which is obviously not what any of us want. So I'd look at that too. But I love that idea of saying, okay, here's all the things we want to teach and all the stuff that needs to be taught. And then what do you want us to cut out so that we can fit it into the time frame that you want? And also trust that the dogs aren't going to get hurt.
We are caring for members of the family, live animals. And so we're saying that we shouldn't invest 8 to 12 weeks for their well-being. Hard for me to swallow that.
Yeah, that's the problem, is when you have problems, it's the dogs that ultimately suffer.
We've done the research. Turnover costs about $4,000 per person on the low side.
And that's for entry level. That's for an entry level position.
And we did a survey, 50% of the staff turnover typically. So if you have 10 staff, that's 5 new staff members per year turning over times 4,000, that's $20,000. So if you invest 8 to 12 weeks and can reduce that by 2 people, you've saved $8,000.
Yeah, so I would go back to some of those numbers too. So Jocelyn said, as an owner, how do I get staff to appreciate the training? I find I spend so much time training to just have them leave. Part of that goes back into who you're hiring. So this is where, when you have a formal training program in place, you're going to hire people and let them know that's what you're doing. You're actually going to take them through a process. You're going to end up screening out some of the people who might apply for a job just for the sake of getting a paycheck. And what we really want you to do is create that job development all the stuff they're learning is transferable skills. It's a really good skill for them to learn. And ultimately, we want the people who are looking for a career in pet care. Those are the people you want to hire. The person who's not just saying, I need to make a buck so I can, pay my bills or whatever. I'm just like a warm body here in your shop. You want the people who are saying, oh, you're going to teach me about dogs and about canine body language and about how to use these customer skills and how to be a good employee and how to understand ethics and responsibility of being on a team. Those are all really good skills, and you need to raise up the value of that, because you're going to get employees that are going to go, I don't want to learn all that. Guess what? Those aren't the employees you should be hiring. So I think that it goes back to what Susan started with to begin with, the whole chicken and the egg. Are people turning over because you don't have a training program, and that's just the fact of life, or the fact that your training program, you're not hiring the people that want to be involved with a training program. So I think it goes back to that. And then Laura, thank you very much. She said the Dog Gurus also has an SOP. We do have a template. We have a 99-page template that is a operations manual. It's a Word document. So you can download that and then give that out to your team and just have them tweak it. So it basically gives you the foundation as a starting point. And it's pretty extensive. It's about 99 pages, and you can use it as is, edit it how you want, whatever. But that's also in our store as well.
Guess what? You can raise your rates and charge more because people know you're worth it. And that pays for the training and the time you've invested. So we have another chicken and the egg thing here going.
Yeah, exactly. And that's one of the biggest things people should be promoting. If you are training your staff, make sure I'm telling you, that is setting you apart from your competition. Susan and I see enough of businesses to know what is normal and what is not. And all of those of you that are listening are probably in the category of doing stuff that is at the excellent level, because you're out there trying to get education and all that, which is awesome. But then it's this weird thing because you guys also think that everybody does this. And so Susan and I are here to tell you that not everybody does. So make sure that if you're doing the right staff training and you're providing education and you're sending your staff to webinars or virtual events or whatever it is, even the fact that you're on this Facebook Live, make sure you're promoting that, because it does set you apart. I can guarantee you it sets you apart, but you don't realize it sets you apart because you think everybody's doing this. So then nobody ever talks about it. I'm just here to tell you, make sure that your clients know you're doing that. And that does give the ability to charge more. And you should charge more.